Good day. Today we're going to go over drone night flight requirements for both recreational and Part 107 pilots, and how this little guy, the VIFLY Strobe, can not only help you meet those requirements, but could help you out during the day too. Now's a good time to hit that thumbs up button below and subscribe to your TMac FPV channel, your home for your journey to better FPV fun, flights, and racing stuff. First, let's take a look at this VIFLY Strobe, its features, and how easy it is to operate. Then I'll get into the drone night flight requirements and how you might want to use this little VIFLY Strobe. Here's what you get in the box. You get the strobe itself, a USB to micro USB charging cable, a couple pieces of 3M dual lock, and a nice little user manual for both operations and charging. The first thing I noticed about this thing is how small it is. Comes in at 28 by 15 by 9, and if you include the button at top, about 12. I was also surprised to find out how lightweight it is, coming in at less than 6 grams. This is important for us FPV pilots who fly micro FPV drones 4 inches and below, or especially if you want to keep any of your aircraft under the 250 gram limit. Comparing the VIFLY Strobe's weight to that of similar type drone strobes, it's easily the lightest weight. Next, we can compare its cost. This little VIFLY Strobe currently runs about $15, whereas other drone strobe lights cost 2 to 4 times as much. So you could get 3 or 4 of these VIFLY Strobes for the price of one of those others. Keep that in mind because in a bit, I'm going to show you why that may be something you want to think about doing. Of course, it's the smallest, the lightest weight, and least expensive, but doesn't work. Well, let's see how this VIFLY Strobe actually works. First, we're going to charge it up using the micro USB. The red light comes on when it's charging and it goes out when it's fully charged. It charges up fairly quickly and it takes about 1.5 hours, and that charge lasts about 4 hours in the strobe mode continuously. Alright, now that it's charged up with the red light off, to turn it both on and off, we long press this button. It has 3 modes: strobe, a slower consistent flashing mode, and also a continuous on mode. To switch modes, we short press this button to go from one to another. We're on strobe now, push the button, and we're on the slower consistent flashing mode. And if we push the button again, it's in its continuous on mode. It also has 3 different colors: white with 3 LEDs you see here, red with 1 LED, and there's 3 modes for this color as well. And it also has green with the 3 different modes and 1 LED. We'll long press to turn it off. And another feature this VIFLY Strobe has is it remembers its last setting you use, so when you turn it on automatically, it powers up in that setting. Remember, we just turned it off when it was in the continuous on mode in green. There it is, the same mode we had when we turned it off. That's nice. So how bright is this? Well, VIFLY says it meets FAA requirements to be seen for at least 3 statute miles, and they've confirmed this using a DJI Mavic Air 2 flight. I happen to have a light meter available to measure its illumination in terms of lux, so let's check it out. First of all, we're going to take a look at what the ambient light measures in lux by taking this cover off the light meter. And then we'll subtract that number from the overall value that this gives in when it's powered on. Now keep in mind, I'm on my workbench sitting next to an open window, and it's a fairly sunny day out. And on top of that, I've got the overhead light on in this room. So in this range, we're getting a value of about 1380 lux. Now I'm going to have to change the range on this meter in order to measure lux from the VIFLY Strobe, because it's so bright it'll basically blank the screen out. So by changing the range, remember this is about 1370, 1380, I'm going to click it once, and you'll see it comes up to times 10. So this 135 times 10 would be 1350. So that's the range we're probably going to need to use for our VIFLY strobe. Let's check it out, turn it on, and in order to measure it, I'm going to put this sensor perpendicular to the light, which is what you're supposed to do with a meter. We're going to turn this on. And we are reading at this distance about 3,800, 3,900. Remember, this is times 10, so 3,900, 4,000. And we can compare that value, 3,900 to 4,000, to the IES table of recommended lighting values. By the way, IES stands for Illuminating Engineering Society. They're just a bunch of really bright guys. Anyway, typical values for lux in various situations I've displayed on the screen, and you can compare the lux values that we just measured of 3,900 to 4,000 from the VIFLY strobe to those, and you can see that in addition to nice features, it's super bright. Now let's see why we might want or need to use it. Now we'll go over the drone night flight requirements according to the US FAA. If you're outside of the US, I encourage you to become familiar with and follow your own country's rules and regulations. When you're flying in the US, the drone night flight requirements are going to differ slightly between whether you're flying recreationally just for fun or for non-recreational purposes. And these requirements are really on a per flight basis. What do I mean by that? Well, I can be and am an FAA certified remote pilot with a small unmanned aircraft systems or SUAS rating. However, if I'm conducting a flight only for fun, the requirements I need to meet are different than if that particular flight was for non-recreational purposes. The three categories of requirements I'm going to go over pertain to the type of training and knowledge you're required to have, the equipment you're required to have, and the rules and regulations you're required to follow. We'll start with training. For recreational flights and pilots only, you're required to take the Recreational UAS Safety Training and Test, or TRUST, and pass the short multiple choice test. This online training is free, takes about 20 minutes to complete, and you're really not able to fail the provided test because they tell you what you got wrong and you have the opportunity to correct it. Once completed, you'll immediately be issued a certificate of completion, which you're required to have as proof of test passage, and make it available to FAA or law enforcement representatives upon request. This is really the FAA's way of trying to ensure that everyone who flies a drone in the U.S. has some sort of basic safety knowledge baseline. It's really simple to take the training. I myself have completed it recently. In my opinion, it's always good to enhance your knowledge. If you're conducting a drone night flight for non-recreational purposes, then you'll need to either have passed the initial Part 107 exam or the required recurring training after passing the initial exam after April 6, 2021. I'll use myself as an example. I passed the initial Part 107 exam and became an FAA certified remote pilot back in August of 2020. Normally, I wouldn't need to take the recurring training for another 2 years. However, with a new rule coming into effect for operations of SUAS over people, which includes night flight operations not necessarily over people, I am required to take the new recurring training if I wanted to fly legally at night. So recently I've completed that training also. It was online and free and took a total for me of about 2 hours, both the training content and taking the test. Once again, you're issued a certificate which you're required to have and make available to FAA and law enforcement reps upon request as proof of completion. The next category we'll take a look at is if there's any specific lighting requirements for recreational and non-recreational flights. Through my research, I've discovered there's not really any additional specific lighting requirements for recreational night flights. However, just as with flights during the day, you are required to keep your drone within visual line of sight, or VLOS, of yourself or your visual observer. Of course, if you want to increase your visual line of sight distance, and this applies for both night and day operations, as I'll demonstrate here shortly, it's probably a good idea to have some lighting on your drone, like the VIFLY Strobe. If you're conducting a drone night flight for non-recreational purposes, as I'll be doing here shortly, there are specific lighting requirements for you to follow. In addition to keeping your drone within VLOS of yourself or your visual observer in accordance with Part 107.31, which includes location, altitude, attitude, and direction of flight, you're also required to have anti-collision lighting that is visible for at least 3 statute miles with a flash rate sufficient to avoid collision, per Part 107.29. This is required for both night flights and flights during civil twilight which is defined below. The last category of requirements we'll take a look at are the rules and regulations. For recreational flights, these are covered in 49 United States Code 44809, which states your aircraft needs to operate in accordance with or within the programming of a community-based organization's set of safety guidelines. To date, the FAA has not officially recognized any community-based organizations. So you're supposed to follow the safety guidelines on the FAA website or those of an existing organization such as the FPV Freedom Coalition, or FPV-FC, whose site I've got a link to in the description below, the AMA, and or the FAA Advisory Circular 91-57B, which is also linked below. For non-recreational flights, of course, you're required to follow everything in 14 CFR Part 107. This and all of the resources and documents I've mentioned, I've made available to you in this video's description below. Now that we've covered the three categories of requirements for both recreational and non-recreational night flights, let's go outside and see how the VIFLY Strobe can help us meet the lighting requirements for night flights and extend our VLOS distance both at night and during the day. All right, it's about 4 p.m. local. And I'm just gonna take my Nexus build and hover somewhere over here in the corner of my front yard without the use of the VIFLY Strobe. We'll see how easy it is to see the quad. I'm heading out over to the corner of the front yard.
TMac, satellite lock achieved. Number of satellites acquired is at least 5.
And I've turned around facing the camera. I don't even know if you can see the quad from this distance away in the middle of the day. I'm going to come back and land and slap the VIFLY Strobe on the quad, and we'll do the same thing, see how easy it is to see then. All right, this time I've got the VIFLY Strobe strapped onto the front of the quad, and I'll be using the white light and the steady on mode. We'll see if this makes a difference, and you can actually see it during the middle of the day. All right, I've turned around and I'm facing the camera. I'll put this up side by side with the first flight, see if you can tell a difference. All right, this is our fly spot. It's almost twilight, and I'm going to be flying alongside this road. It's a country road, no traffic on it, up towards that hill up there, which is about a little over 300 meters away.
We watch the sun go down over the same old town, like so many times before. We look at the same old stars, battle the same old wars, like so many times before. And I know that we're not perfect, but I'm gonna miss all that we had. Yeah, I know that we're not perfect, but I need this night for the last time. Stay. Know you're gone in the morning, but I'll be okay if you stay. Know you're gone we had. I'll never forget. We will always share a bond, no matter what. 'Cause you have a piece of my heart, and I know that we're not perfect, but I'm gonna miss all that we had. Yeah, I know that we're not perfect, but I need this night for the last time. Stay, stay. No, you're gone in the morning, but I'll be okay if you stay, stay. No, you're gone in the morning, but I'll be okay if you stay, stay. If you stay, if you stay, if you stay. No, you're gone in the morning, but I'll be okay. Till the sun goes up, yeah, for a little moment. Just hold me closer, I'll be okay. Till the sun goes up, yeah, for a little moment. Just hold me closer, I'll be okay. We watch the sun go down over the same old town. Stay, stay. No, you're gone in the morning, but I'll be okay if you stay, stay. No, you're gone in the morning, but I'll be okay if you stay. If you stay, if you stay, if you stay.
Hope you found this enlightening. Thanks for your time. I'll catch you next video. Clear skies, friend.